but that we're doing this all the time, and that in order to organize, we have to share knowledge. So the question is, if we are doing it all the time, and we share knowledge all the time, why do organizations have such a hard time getting people to share knowledge? And so to me, that's a question that is a question about, that tells us a lot about organizations. It's not so much a question about knowledge or knowledge management, but it's more a question about organizations and about knowledge management in organizations.
I have an answer for you.
Yeah.
Most organizations give rewards and control and power on the basis of what people can do. And certain people feel that their knowledge is valuable in their being able to achieve those goals of power, and they don't want to share it. Whereas if you are doing organizing and bringing together people for something where it's a collective goal that you have identified and the people have signed on to, then it'll work together, because you are not dealing with individual awards and individual power involved. And organizations, unfortunately, because they are run by people at a higher level and give rewards and not so rewarding, people feel that if they share, they lose some of their value.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that's
Right.
simple as that,
Yeah.
I think.
No, I think there's a lot in that. And again, it comes back to how in a way, how we see the structure, the functioning of organizations. And I believe that we still suffer from, we still have embedded in our organizing, which is the way we manage things. We call it management, but it's a way of organizing, is that we still have that sort of, and I'm from South Africa, so I'm familiar with apartheid. We have this sort of organizational apartheid, where you've got people who make decisions and people who do the work, and they're separate, and the knowledge is with the people who make decisions, and the people who do the work don't need to have knowledge, and they don't have knowledge was, the old view of it. And so the idea of knowledge being held extensively and shared is not part of the thinking. So it seems to me that the human side of organizing and knowledge sharing is in fact very social. And that what we've done is to overlay that, what I think of as 19th century, and probably it goes back before that, but let's blame it on the Victorians. It's a sort of 19th century colonial mentality about control.
Before you get to colonial.
Get to the colonial.
I'm in a minority of one.
And it's very patriarchal, and it was a kind of divide and rule mentality. But I'm not sure, and so I think we do build the competition into it. But I'm just suggesting that my perspective on that is that that's not a human trait. That's a kind of mental model that we built, at a certain time. And it obviously is not a mental model of structures that serve the purpose of sharing knowledge, is the point. So that when we teach kids at school, we're not teaching them, obviously, to share knowledge. We're saying, if you know more than the next person, you'll get ahead. You know what I mean? And so the idea is you keep your knowledge to yourself. And so that really goes back to the point that I was making. If we're really serious about sharing knowledge, then it goes, then what we're looking at is how do we organize? How do we create the organizations that we have that are the basis for getting work done, for organizing to share knowledge? And I believe you're absolutely right. I mean, our education system, and I know because I'm part of it as well, it reinforces all the time that idea of patriarchy and the expert who has the knowledge. And I think the other point is that when we look at the types of issues that we're dealing with in organizations, what we're organizing to do, whether it's creating software or whether it's a government organization that is dealing with, say, transport policy issues and road networks or whatever it is, that the work is so incredibly complex that much of the emphasis or much of the focus of what we're doing is not the technical side, but is connecting the people who have the ability to kind of generate the ideas and deal with the obstacles, of community group, when you think about road building, the community activist groups. I mean, it's the complexity of organizing is so great that in a way it overshadows, I think, the technical side of things, and that's why the knowledge sharing is so important from my perspective. That's why organizations are interested in it, and why they're struggling with it is not so much at the technical level, although that's a huge issue because of the depth of technical knowledge that's required. But it's that ability to share knowledge so that we can coordinate these very large, sort of fluid, flexible networks of people who have to come together to get anything done. Yeah.
Sort of, I think what you're saying. When I saw your previous slide, what do you think when you hear the word organized?
Right.
To me, that's a synonym for efficiency. I wasn't looking at it as a physical organization of people, but if I myself get organized, then I would be more efficient.
Right.
And the problem is within organizations, and I'm sure see who's down here, the larger the organization, quite often the less efficient you are.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a real problem. I mean,
well,
there's a disconnect there.
Yes, and absolutely. I mean, I think that the disconnect actually for large organizations is that the efficiency model, which is a factory model, is really sort of in the way of this process of sharing knowledge. So in a way, it's the efficiency model that's responsible for the inefficiencies, which is a nice. But what we have, and I'm just trying. How do you want to go on the time? Are you sticking more or less to the schedule that we had, about 45 minutes plus time for questions?
Well, whatever you'd like.
Okay, all right. So I just don't want to run over time. Denise.
Is it possible also that as the organization gets larger, the social networks become more frayed and more dispersed, and as a result, the smaller organization is able to stay tighter around their social networks and keep knowledge flowing through the organization, keeping communication channels open. But as things get larger, it becomes more and more complex and difficult to do that.
I think that's a great question. When I think about the complexity of social networks, and let's face it, in our own work, I mean, we recognize that the networks that we use to get things done are not within our organization. They extend across organizations, they extend across sectors of the economy and so on. That the complexity of social networks in itself is not too much of an issue, I believe, because we seem to be able to coordinate people seem to be able to manage networks, and it's obviously not a centrally managed process. It's very decentralized process, but we seem to be able to do that well. I think the problem is that as the organization gets large, we try to impose control. We don't even think about the social networks. So the networks are not part of the model that we're using. The networks are how we get the work done. The networks are where the knowledge sharing is. But all we're trying to do is to try and sort of bring back or impose a structure on it.